Development Scrutiny Committee on this Friday morning, 14th of May, 2021. Just to make you aware, today's meeting will be recorded. I'd also like to welcome Democratic Service Officer Nadine back to our meeting this morning. Welcome, Nadine. Can I also welcome any members of the public and press to today's meeting? Can I kindly ask you to observe the meeting only and not to speak or participate? Can I please remind you all to switch your phone to silent for the duration of the meeting? Can I refer you to the protocols for remote meetings which have been previously circulated? Your microphone should be switched to mute unless you are speaking. Should you wish to ask a question or make a comment, can you please indicate either via the chat function or by raising your electronic hand? I will assume that you have all read the paperwork before you today prior to the meeting. Please only use the chat function to indicate if you wish to speak as an alternative to the electronic hand function or to raise any technical issues. When asking a question, can you please indicate which page number you are referring to? And the first item on the agenda today is to do a roll call. I'm Councillor Steve Hunt and I'm here this morning. I will now ask Nadine from the Democratic Services to take the roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rachel Taylor.
Present.
Councillor Dean Causey.
Present.
Councillor Chris Jones. Councillor Hugh James.
Present, Nadine.
Councillor Sheila Penry.
Present.
Councillor Sean Percy.
Present.
Councillor Cypher Harman.
Present.
Councillor Nigel Hunt. Councillor Scott Bamsey.
Nigel.
Present, Nadine.
Councillor Jamie Evans.
Presennol, diolch.
Councillor Simon Noyle.
Hi, Nadine, I'm here, thank you.
Councillor Annette Wingrave.
Present.
So we got apologies from Councillor Leanne Jones and we got Councillor Peter Rees.
Present.
Officers Nicola P.S. Simon Brennan.
Present.
Peter Jackson.
Present.
Lana Bainan.
Present.
Carly Davis.
Present.
And we've got apologies from Kerry Morris, Dave Griffiths and Andrew Collins. And we got Nicola Heaton.
Present.
There, that's it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Nadine. Nigel Hunt is here.
Yeah.
Have you marked him present? Yeah.
Yeah.
Nicola Pierce. Was there apologies from Nicola or is she having difficulty getting in? Do you know anything, Nadine? Or Simon, do you know anything?
I think Nick is in other meetings, unfortunately, this morning, Chair.
Okay, no worries.
That's okay, only for us to know. That's lovely. Item 2 on the agenda is the Chair's announcement. So we have one item on the scrutiny papers this morning, and that's agenda item 4, Active Travelways Act 2013, the update on progress, implementation and revising the Council Active Travel Network map. And we have chosen to scrutinise one item on the Cabinet Board papers, which is agenda item 7, the examination of the audit Wales into the Council's Regeneration Service as part of its wellbeing objectives. So those will be the items we have chosen to scrutinise this morning. All other items will be going forward to the Cabinet as per report. Item 3 on the agenda today is declarations of interest. Do I have any? No hands, no comments. There we are. No declarations of interest. Right. Item 4 is the Active Travel Wales Act 2013, as I've indicated. I will now ask officers. I believe Kerry is not chair this morning. So Lana Bainan will be taking this report, I believe. If they would like to add anything to the report, members will have read it on pages 5 to 14, I hope. But if they haven't, they can look at it now. They're on pages 5 to 14. So Lana, do you want to add anything before I go directly to questions?
No, I'm fine, Chair. That's fine. If anyone has any questions, that's fine.
Lovely then. Okay, in pre-briefing, the first indication I had for questions that was submitted was by Councillor Causey. So over to Dean for the first question. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is just a general question, really, or a series of questions about the concept of active travel. I agree with it. I like it. I think it's, you know, it's the future in many ways. It's great. Clearly, it's easier to deliver in some places rather than others. I think in the more sort of built up places where people live and work in fairly close proximity, it's a lot easier to put things in place to allow people to walk and cycle to school, work, appointments, shops, that type of thing, and that's fair enough. Obviously, in the more rural areas, particularly in the valleys areas, you've got issues such as, you know, the geography, the topology, the hills, and of course the sort of the ribbon nature of lots of these sort of places. And for that reason, you know, it is entirely commendable what you guys have done in terms of trying to build gradually, slowly, a network of shorter active travel routes. However, and this is where my question is, I suppose, is sort of, you know, if we're looking at commuting, you know, what's the phrase, meaningful short journeys, you know, commuting, getting to shops, getting to schools, getting to doctor's appointments, to me it seems, you know, so the question is, can we do more on having fewer but bigger, longer, better active travel routes? So for argument's sake, I've got to check to get the detail right on this. NCN 43 then, which runs up the Swansea Valley, it gets as far as sort of halfway up the hill that connects the Dilys Valley with the Swansea Valley, and then it stops. Now, if there was a way of connecting that, for argument's sake, you know, you're connecting then, okay, my patch, I've got a personal interest there, obviously, but the whole Dilys Valley and the Neath Valley and possibly other areas where it makes more sense because people will go to school there, people will work there, you know, rather than inter-community links where, you know, you've already got pavements half the time, you know what I mean? So people already walk in, perhaps just badged differently, perhaps, and you know, you've got these like really weird sort of, you know, 10 yards of lines on the floor, which is bike, and then nothing else. You know, I don't quite get that myself. But anyway, so I've waffled on for a long time, but I'm just trying to get my head around it all. And I know it doesn't quite work in our sort of communities because of the nature of them. But I would just like to, you know, a bit of a longer term vision. Yes, the smaller routes are important. I get it, the gradual building of a network. But in terms of a longer term vision, how are we going to connect these routes to so that they're longer and people can actually commute to where they actually work? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, no worries, Lara.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Causey. Yes, fully agree with you. So we've undertaken a consultation back in January, and we had a great response, right? We've used the Welsh Government engagement tool called Commonplace. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but basically you can drop a pin on where there are issues within the network. So we had over I think it was 1,040 people actually contributed. It was a very good response rate, but there were certain areas, particularly the rural areas, where we didn't get much response. And there were, I think it was Croeseru and up in the Upper Avon Valley, we didn't get much of a response. We have spoken to those councillors to try and promote, get the awareness that the consultation is going on, because we need the feedback from the community to know, where there are issues. And the pins sort of go different colours. So if it's red, obviously there are issues there, and then you can put a little commentary of what's wrong there. So we can review all of these. These responses actually been really good, because they've feedbacks come through saying that we need a dropped curve and things like that. And if a drop curve, it can be cheaply done and quickly done. And also what we find in as well is barriers, particularly up in Upper Avon Valley, they're not disability compliant. So we're looking at sort of removing them as well. So we're getting all these issues through, and then we can pass them on to relevant sections, because we're working with Amanda Phillips and Dave Griffiths' team, being more coordinated then in our response with active travel. So that first phase of consultation is very important to know, as you said, Councillor Causey, what the issues are. And then that will feed in then to the second consultation. It's a formal consultation, and that will be in July to October, and that'll be for 12 weeks. But this report that I'm bringing forward today is an annual update on progress on the consultation, where we are, and also what schemes have come through to date. And because Amanda Phillips, she applies for the active travel funding, and then she works with ourselves and with the engineers to design and prioritise and look at the feasibility of routes and cost them out. So that's what we've got a list, bullet point list there of the future plans and proposals for this financial year, because we got 721,000 funding for this financial year. So the outcomes from the first consultation, we are currently looking at those now. We're working with Sustrans, so I've got an officer, Laura Pack, and Sustrans are helping us map these new routes, because as part of the commonplace consultation, some of the community, the public, they've said, oh, what about this? There's a gap here. So we've taken that on board, and we're starting to map where these gaps are, so that we've got an understanding, because the new guidance has come out and said we've got to have a 250 met mesh density. Now I thought, well, what does that mean? But basically it's a grid, I understand it, of 250 metres by 250 metres. And if a route goes through it, it changes a different colour. So we can see it's almost like a web of routes for us to have, so it's more sort of concentrated. And that's what we've got to try and get within our county borough. Sort of a good solid web of routes. So that's going to be fundamental, and I think that's what we need to do. We need to get the word out there. We've used radio, we've used social media, Facebook, we've used Evening Post, but I think we've got infographic that showed that sort of where the areas that we didn't get much response. If GCG was brilliant, we had loads from Crynant, which isn't a built-up area, and I think with the rural areas, with the new guidance now, we can link to built-up areas. So I think that's what's important as well, because I know, Councillor Causey, you've said about the topography, but if we can sort of route it down to canals, the rivers, along the rivers, helps with people's health and well-being as well, because you're off the road as well. And over lockdown, it's been, a lifeline for people. But I think we're also listening now through speaking to up in the Upper Avon Valley, there's issues with barriers, and disabled people haven't been able to get through some parts because of these barriers. So that's what we've got for this financial year. We're starting to look at removal and replacement of access control measures and seating as well, because if you've got long routes, people might want to have a break. So I think we're looking at we're looking at that, and also cycle counters as well to have an understanding of how well the route is used. So yeah, so it's the consultation that we need to get out there for the public to respond. And then if there's a need, which is what the guidance suggests, we'll start looking at these routes then up in the rural areas. But we need, you know, a good response rate really, so that we can say there's a problem there. We need to start looking at it.
Yeah, thank you, Lana. Dean, all right? Do you want to come back?
Can I just come back
Okay.
very briefly?
Yeah,
Thank you, Lana. That's really helpful. I mean, you know, I've had loads of discussions with people on active travel fairly recently over the last year, I suppose. Been promoting the consultation. Probably need to go a bit harder on that then, I suppose. But I think like the point really that I didn't do a very good job of making is, you know, you mentioned £700,000 funding is clearly an issue. You know, you could put 10k of you know, proper disabled access tarmac cycle path, cost you over £1 million, you know, I get that. But active travel is not about recreation, it's about short, meaningful journeys for commuting, blah, blah, blah. But often, you know, an active travel route will also be used for recreation. If you take, like we say, the canal tow bus and Neath and that. So, you know, what I'm sort of driving at then is, yes, we've got the active travel network and we're doing all the sort of the smaller stuff, the barriers, the drop curbs, great, I love it, marvelous. But is there a bigger vision that says, do you know what, we need £2 million to do this? And yes, it will have active travel outcomes, but perhaps we can draw in some regen funding, we can draw in some, you know, safer routes to schools funding, we can draw in some tourism funding, whatever it might be. You don't need to come back, Lana. You know, that's absolutely fine, and I'm very, very grateful for your really useful reply, actually. But that's where my thinking is at the moment. You know, perhaps need to feed that into the consultation. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dean. Good points raised there. Scott, before I go to the next indication from the pre-briefing, Scott, you got your hand up. Is your question in relationship to what Dean has asked and Lana's come back with? If it's separate, I will leave you in the order of the indication of pre-scrutiny. So can I ask you if it's directly with what Lana responded to Dean on or not, please?
No, it's not. Sorry, Chair. Put me at the back of the list of the others, please.
If you put your hand down, then I'll add you to the list. There we are. Not to confuse me, because it doesn't take a lot, as I said. Right. The next indication at the pre-briefing is Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's unusual for another member to get ahead of me on active travel, so well done on that, Dean. Yeah, thanks for the report, Lana. Had a good read through it. Obviously, we keep in touch a lot on these issues, so it's very good to see some of the information from this year as well. Yeah, some of the projects being delivered so far have been great. Done a fair bit of cycling on some of the new infrastructure. Not been on the new path between Neath and Tonner yet, but looking forward to seeing how that is. But you know, as Dean said, and you've alluded to, there's a lot more work to do before our communities are properly pedestrian cycle friendly. We've got a few good bits of infrastructure and then a lot to do. And you know, your report acknowledges and mentions the revised active travel guidance, of which, you know, I've read all 500 pages of it, and it is it is more ambitious than the previous iteration, and that mesh density you mentioned is particularly important, but also the design standard has kind of gone up from the previous iteration as well, which is a good thing, but has also increased the cost of some of the routes because we've perhaps got extra width or different infrastructure to put in. But I certainly think the current iteration of the active travel guidance from Welsh Government is going to go some way to achieving what Dean talked about and what we've discussed, and that proper network that will really work for people. And from the draft map that I've seen from the first bit of the consultation, you know, that's reflecting that as well. We compare that to the last map from 2018, and it's worlds apart. There's so many more routes identified there, and that comes on to one of my first questions really, which is a bit of a concern, and that is whether we've got the capacity in planning and in highways to carry out that audit work, the design work, apply for the funding, project manage, etc. Because obviously there's a huge job to do. There's a lot of money sloshing about from Welsh Government. It's competitive. So we've got to be putting in high quality bids against, you know, other councils. We've got to make sure we can get the bids in and keep getting them in. So I guess my question is, are we looking to try and build the team up, you know, in anticipation of this new map? Because I'm aware we can apply for, you know, project management costs against schemes, for example, and design costs as well. Obviously, that's at risk, I suppose. If we don't get the scheme, we may need to pay a member of staff. But I'd certainly like us to be applying for the maximum number of schemes every year, you know, going forward, if we're going to properly realise this. So that's my first bit of my question. I'm going to ask a couple of other things, and if you don't mind. One is picking up on Commonplace, which you mentioned, and I think the platform's great. The amount of feedback we had was phenomenal, and although there was a regional and sort of local disparity in some areas, it was astonishing to see how many people fed into that. But the question, I suppose, is, have we considered keeping something like that on an ongoing basis? Because I suppose we've had this kind of avalanche of feedback, some of which is really useful for designing the network, but some of which, like you mentioned, is little things, barriers, drop curves, signage, things that we should be doing on an ongoing basis. And we've kind of had this big mountain of feedback in one go, and you've probably got lists and lists of these little things. And actually, if we could get that drip feeding in over time, that would be the best way to deal with these problems on an ongoing basis. And I just wonder whether it's something we've explored with customer services, etc., in terms of how we take feedback from the public on highways issues, if there's perhaps a better way of doing that, because I think we've clearly demonstrated that the Commonplace platform works and people can use it. So the other thing is on the subject of consultation. So I got a bit of a question, because the timescale seemed to have changed a little bit, and what we originally put out seems to be a little bit different. And I'm trying to unpick kind of what's happened and where we are. From what I gather, it's taken longer to do the first consultation, or to get through all the responses. That's how it appears to be. You mentioned we're doing the 12-week consultation next. So have we skipped the middle one? Because there was going to be a middle consultation as well, wasn't there? So I'd like to know a little bit about that as well, if that's okay. Thanks, Chair.
No worries, Sean. Lana? You're on mute.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Percy. Okay, I think there were 3 questions. So the first one, with regard to resources, I think it is. I think it was, yeah. So basically, I've got one officer, Laura Pack, and she isn't sort of fully on active travel, even because we've got a number of other remits that we cover, for example, asset sponsorship and etc. So, so it's split. The active travel function in the authority is split between myself, so I've got the responsibility of producing the active travel network map with Laura Pack. And then Amanda Phillips, then on Dave Griffiths' team, she applies for the funding and works with the engineers to design and implement the routes. Okay, but I take your point, and you know, with regard to active travel, I think it's so important for the authority moving forward. You know, corporately, it's coming down from Welsh Government. There's obviously commitment there. Because there's lots of funding available, and as you said, Councillor Percy, I think they're starting to look at that's more capital grant funding, but there's possibly revenue funding coming through, so we could potentially fund extra posts, possibly, because as you say, we haven't got enough people really to deliver and give it the push it needs. But that's just my view. You know, Laura's working as hard as she can, as is Amanda and their team as well in highways, and the engineers. But I suppose it's we have had some money from the active travel funding to commission consultants. So we've got Sustrans. So Sustrans are helping us, but they are really stretched as well. They've got a number of different authorities that they're working with. So I think they are coming under pressure as well. So that, I suppose, answers, Councillor Percy, your third question with regard to the consultation. We did programme 3 consultations, which would have been ideal. So, you know, the first one went out, and it's all about the 5 ways of working as well. So get out there early engagement so we can understand the issues. So that was brilliant. So then we were going to move then and say, right, this is when we consulted, this is the outcomes, this is the issues. Show them on a map, they could comment before we went into the formal stage of the 12-week consultation, before we submitted to the Welsh Government. But we just had so much of a response, and then we had to, it's quite sort of intensive with regard to mapping and putting the routes on correctly. So that's taken, so it's wiped out the second consultation, unfortunately, which I've discussed with Welsh Government. They're okay with it, because what we didn't want is that it's not sort of almost like a sound procedure that we've gone through, making sure that we've engaged properly. But they're okay with that. So we are moving through to the well, what would have been the third consultation, but it's now 2, so it's the formal one. But we will be bringing a report back to board in June, and that's basically showing members, senior officers, the responses then that came from the first consultation, and then we can show the maps get that approved then before we go out to consultation. So yes, please, we'd like an active travel team. That'd be great. But you know, we're working within current resources, but yeah, it would be great to have the resources to really push this, because it's you know, with the Health and Wellbeing Act as well, it's fundamental. And I know Councillor Causey was saying it is active travel is to get from, you know, to go to the shops, to go to school. That's what it's for. But it is also sort of leisure routes as well. People are using it, getting out, and it's fitness, the health, you know. So it's great, and you know, it's going to be a high on the agenda when we do the replacement local development plan. It's going to be, you know, fundamental, and incorporated within the strategy of the plan. The other thing then, I think, was the consultation, the commonplace, I think, Councillor Percy, with regard to, and that is a great platform. And I think corporately, there is possibly, we are looking at that. We use objective, that's what we use in planning policy, and that's it. There's a function whereby we can interactively engage. But we are looking into the mapping side of things now. Particularly, I know I'm flipping over to the local development plan, but you know, when candidate sites come out, we're looking to map it and integrate it fully with engagement. So it's an interactive tool for people. And I work in maps. You can see things more clearly. Personally, that's how I think. So, but I think corporately, we are starting to look at commonplace, because Welsh Government obviously promote it, and they've paid for it for us to use for active travel. But as you say, I think it is a very, very good tool. It's a powerful tool as well, because there's more of the facility there. What you can do with it is very, very good.
Thank you, Lana. Sean, you want to come back?
Yeah, only briefly. Thanks, Chair. No, thanks for that, Lana. That's really helpful. Yeah, I was curious what was going on with those consultations, but I suppose we've got a long 12-week period now to make sure that what we've put together is right, and we can really get that back in front of the public and make sure they're happy with what we've done with all their suggestions. I can see the cabinet members popped a hand up as well, and perhaps it'd be good to have her view on how we're going to approach this resourcing going forward, because I think that is, you know, for me, the key concern as this builds. I know all of our teams are stretched everywhere now, but it's that design capacity and everything else that doesn't necessarily fall under your remit, Lana, but I know everybody I speak to is always busy and always, you know, working flat out. And I just can't see how we would deliver this without getting that extra resourcing in. So I hope to get a view from the cabinet member on that one. It'd be great. But thanks for the answer there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Before I move on to other members with their pre-briefing questions, I'll go to the cabinet member now, as she has her hand up. Annette, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Sean, you are right. We do need much more money in the pot to be able to push these projects forward. But we are where we are. We have to rely on what comes down the line. And all I can tell you is that if we get the money, we will put the resources in place. But it'd be very remiss of me now if I don't thank Lana and her team for all the work they do, because I know Lana works on, she's got a lot of different hats, and this is only one of them, and she puts in hours and hours on this, and it's a credit to the team, the very, very small team that she has, of what they produce. And thank you, Lana. Sorry, it's not more interested in that, Sean, but we just have to wait to see what comes down the line.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Annette. I'm sure all members of council, not just this committee, would echo those comments. We know all our officers are extremely busy and definitely wearing more hats than that they possibly are trained to do. That's how well they work together. So thank you, Lana. Pass that message on from our committee to all your officers. We certainly appreciate all the efforts and hard work you put in to deliver services and everything for us. Back to the members. Councillor Hugh James next, please.
Oh, thank you, Chair. First of all, Lana, can I add my thanks to you and the team? You'd swear the amount of work you've got there. You've got a team of 100 under you, and I know you're just limited, as all the members here know. And it's such an important report. A couple of questions I've got really is that it has brought out the goodness, even with lockdown, of people using the canal paths, even in my area, right down to the coastline, and people are being active. But I would have thought that all this is really about, when you talk about active travel, Lana, you could perhaps respond on that. I'm looking at the people who are inactive, who can't get around, and Dean sort of spread on it, really. These are elderly people who've got no transport anymore. And, they are sort of stuck. So the active travel is so important to them. And the other question I've got, and maybe you want to refer it to my colleague Peter Jackson on this, he's the expert. Where are we with private bus owners on all this? Because with active travel, particularly in the valleys and other places, we need some form of good public transport, which has suffered over the years, and community transport, and also rail transport. And long term, in active travel, I really believe, and I'm interested in railways, long term, we're still looking at opening up routes, like, for example, at the valley. And one valley, your valley, Chair, you've got a big rail development there. Why not put a couple of these smaller trains on long term? So I just wanted to comment on that, Lana, and maybe you want to bring Peter in. Thank you, Chair.
No worries, thank you. Lana?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor James. Yes, I think there is a large proportion of our population within the county borough, obviously, that's is within the cohort of classified as older people. So I think that we need to understand their issues, and as part of the commonplace engagement, we've been looking at, because there tends to be the feedback that we've received, because we've got lots of analytics sort of on there, looking at the cross section of the population that have responded, and that's where we can see there's gaps. And I think older people, that was flagged up, younger people. Because the schools were shut, we couldn't sort of engage with them as much as well, the younger population, but they are on social media. We've been using sort of Facebook, but maybe the older population, we need to think how we get the message across and get their views, so we can understand what the issues that they are facing. Because, as you say, because I know there's electric bikes now, there's because I'll be speaking to Amanda, because I know part of the bid we were looking, we could look at perhaps getting extra bikes I know that we were discussing that. So maybe we could look at maybe getting electric bikes, because, you know, in cities you see sort of there's bikes there, bike racks, and you can pay with your credit card. But electric bikes, so that it applies then to, you know, older people. And we've got lots of hills in this county borough as well, so that would be useful. But I know there's scooters as well for people to get around. But we need the surface sort of right as well, so it's accessible. And I know Councillor Percy mentioned that with the revised active travel guidance now, it's much stricter on how you score the routes. So, and you know, I think it's, the term is sort of rolled like tarmac. I think that's, you know, so it's a nice flat smooth surface for people to use. So but I think, yeah, with saying about the private bus owners, I think what we need is a linked up sort of network, isn't it? So that you've got that we think about bus services and make sure that it links up to active travel routes and seating. So yeah, it's a strategic look at things. It goes back to Councillor Causey, what he was saying, that I think we need to collaborate, working together with all the sections, you know, with Peter's team, Dave, Griff, Amanda, the engineers, to look at it, stand back and look at the network and say, right, there's a problem up there. And if we resolve that, albeit it's going to be a lot more money, but it's going to be bigger sort of gains, or, you know, so I think, yes, definitely, rather than sort of looking like in a microcosm, looking down at one route, albeit it will help that community. But if we do that, it can, and tourism, I know Carly's on here as well. So it, you know, it's multiple benefits then, it's layered. So I think, yeah, that's the view we need to take moving forward, work together.
Thank you, Lana. Peter, did you want to come in? Who mentioned you?
Yeah, it's just to inform members that Transport for Wales are already looking at this. They've commissioned consultants called Arabs, and they're looking at integrated responsive transport, where community transport car schemes will play a part in getting people to the main bus routes, and indeed backfill gaps that are appearing in the public transport network. I'm aware that some of the CT schemes have already started looking at electric bikes for active travel. So we are all working together. I know Transport for Wales, we have got a system where we're sitting down and analysing what they are proposing going forward, because there have been shortcomings in some of our rural areas and in fact in some of our built up areas, and we are going through what they're looking at putting forward, and it should in theory tie in with all the active travel routes, so that you will be able to cycle to somewhere and get on a bus and hopefully put your cycle on a bus. That would be the ideal world.
Thank you, Peter. Hugh, all right? Happy with the responses?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Can I thank you both for the responses? And it's an exciting report, and we as members need to give you all that total background support to this. It's so important. Thank you, Lana. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Hugh. Jamie, I have seen your hand up. I've added you to the list, Jamie Evans, Councillor Jamie Evans. Nigel, you would be next, but forgive me, Scott has indicated he may have to leave in 5 minutes or 10 minutes to another appointment. So I'll go to Scott first, and then I'll come to you, Nigel. Councillor Scott. Oh, sorry. Go on, Scott. Sorry. Go on, you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Nigel. Let me jump in. It's a very exciting report. I'm sure all members would agree. It's exciting for the county to have this. Just 2 questions, if I may, and a couple of observations. For myself personally, it's really pleasing to see that Port Talbot Hospital to Baglan railway station is on the list. As a local member, I'm sure Nigel's the same. We'd like to sort of become involved in this, and we'll take a keen interest in the route that this is going to take. First question, really, we've got a piece of land. It's between Pendarvis and Brynner Avenue. I just wonder what avenue we could take to perhaps add this to the list, if not this year, possibly next year, because at the minute it's basically a dirt track which has got a high footfall. A lot of people use it. I used to walk home from school that way. I think it'd link Aberafan up to Sandfields East. And I think it'd be little cost for great gain for there. Sean's indicating there, not sure if
yeah, Chair, if you don't mind, I actually submitted that route as part of my consultation response. So it has been put in. Lana can perhaps answer whether it was kept in for the next stage of the consultation, but I did put it in my consultation response at stage 1.
Oh, great. Oh, nice to see we're on the same page, Sean. Yeah, great. Oh, there we are. Okay, if that's already been submitted. The second point I'd like to make is, again, pleasing to see New Bridge Road bridge diversion on the list. I think the bridge has been closed 7, going on 8 years now, and it's a key. Anyone living in Port Talbot would know that's a key route. It links up pretty much most of the town to Aberafon Beach. So it's from a tourist point of view, but also a safety point of view, because it leads people to Victoria Road and the old Beach Hill, basically, which is a notorious junction. We've had numerous accidents there recently. It's pleasing. We found out in this committee we've had money from Welsh Government for these new cameras, which is good, which should improve the safety. But, it is of high importance because it does divert cyclists to this busy junction. We had a meeting with UK Power Reserve, which I'm not sure if all of you are aware, that they operate the store on Avon Way, which is around this area. And in a meeting it was almost 2 years ago now, UK Power Reserve agreed to give the land at the back of that store and also agreed to develop that land for us. Again, we've had a lot of issues with the planning. They're not keeping their promises on quite a lot of things, and this is one thing that we've seen little action on. So it's pleasing to see that on the report. But will this route be purely Welsh Government funding, or are we going to hold UK Power Reserve to their promise? And are we going to involve them and get a significant contribution from them like they promised? I just wonder what.
Yeah.
Okay,
thank you. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bamsey. Lana, before you come in, can I just also remind members that the consultation, maybe you want to touch on it, Lana. Obviously, parochial-wise, we all would like to see routes in all our communities. It'll all be on costs and on funding and so forth. But the mechanism is there, I think, that you've mentioned, and we've had the consultation. You mentioned the next consultation. I suppose you just so that we don't get bogged down with individuals about their own wards where they identify them. Maybe you want to touch on where they put that in so that we don't continue in this debate with identifying them now today, because the agenda item isn't really about looking to put them in our wards today. It's about what it says in the report. So yeah. I just want to make that point clear. But
yeah, apologies for that. Perhaps you could just go to question 2 then, if that's okay. Sorry about that.
No, Scott, it's fine. No, it's not a criticism. It's a valid point. And
yeah, no, it's a fair point.
But if we all did it, I would. I would suggest that we all got at these areas in our wards. But Lana,
no, it's a fair point.
As briefly as you can, so we can move a little bit of progress, please. No, Scott, good questions. Thank you. Over to you, Lana.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Thank you, Councillor Bamsey. It's just great from my perspective how engaged all the members are. I think it's great. And with Councillor Percy, how comprehensive the report that you submitted, I almost feel as if it's helped us profoundly. And it's almost a case I've had an extra pair of hands, extra officer. It's it's been Councillor Percy's input has been phenomenal, and his submission did include Pendaris and Brynner Avenue, I think it was. Councillor Bamsey mentioned. So we just quickly on that, we are reviewing the submissions, and when we take the board report through June, I think it is the 25th. You can see then where it is that that if it's been included, which I think it has. But I can't say at this point, as I say, because we're still assessing the responses because there's been so many. And the New Bridge Road diversion, yes, with regard to the store on Avon Way, I think that they were looking at gifting the land, giving part of the land, and I think it was part of the planning application from memory, but I'll have to look at the detail of that, because I think that with Newbridge Road diversion, I think the land acquisition and feasibility study is ongoing with that, and I know Amanda Phillips and I know Councillor Percy's been involved in that. So yeah, so hopefully we can get that land as well, with the store contributing, as well as the Welsh Government funding.
Great. Oh, thanks. Yeah, just my concern. We're losing faith quite rapidly in UK Power Reserve and the way they're acting. So yeah, if we can sort of hold them to their promises and obviously to the planning, that'd be great. Thank you.
I think we all agree with you there, Scott. To be fair, you all right? Questions answered? Happy?
Yes. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for the answers as well, Anna.
No worries. Thank you. Over to Councillor Nigel Hunt then, please. Thank you for your patience, Nigel.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I want to say that the discussion here today has been of a high standard. It's been a really enjoyable meeting. It's not always that way. I don't often say this, but today I've really enjoyed some of the contributions. So I just like to say that. And I do have concerns really about the staffing levels that's been brought up. But what I'd like to know, Lana, really, is how do we compare Neath Talbot to the other 21 counties in Wales in terms of how much funding we get in comparison with the other counties? Is that available, or could you, if it's not available right now, if you could briefly tell us how we're doing, or could you send that on to us or tell us where we could look at that? Secondly, the maps, the mesh maps, with the 250 meters for the urban areas. I think that's obviously you're telling us that it's a big improvement as on 2018. But I haven't seen the map, and I'm sure a lot of members would like to be able to see it. Could you tell us where we could access these maps? So I'd like to ask those two questions. I'd like to bring a point up as well, going back to the last full council meeting we had. It was on payroll, and in that, I'd done a bit of research on it, and I went to the government guidance on payroll, and in that, what struck me was that Neath Talbot, as a percentage of our gross revenue expenditure, we spend 47% of it. That's a lot of money, right? That's over £220 million. It's a significant amount of money, but in the guidance that I was reading, councils are expected to have over 50%, in excess of 50% of their gross revenue expenditure should be on payroll. Now, when I was in that meeting, I was really thinking about street care, because that's the obvious place for me where we don't have enough staff. But when I'm hearing this today, is that we should be having more staff on this, because there's a lot of money, and it's something that we all want. We all know as members, and you've seen from the consultation, our residents, they want, it's very important, active travel to work, and for leisure in these times, people are rediscovering it, and you've got a place like the Avon Valley, which is world class in terms of cycling. So I think as members we should really be pushing for extra staff on this. It makes sense because there's a lot of funding out there from the Welsh Government, and I think we'll find we don't, compared to some of the other counties, on a lot of the counties, I don't think we are getting what we should get. Now, Lana, I think you're doing an excellent job, and as I said, the discussion here today, I genuinely mean this, has been of a high standard. We're all benefiting from it and going forward. And I hope we can all be united together as a Regeneration Committee to take this forward and improve Neath Talbot and to bring long-term plans in. So yeah, I just wanted to raise that point really about the payroll and about our 47%. And we should really be looking at getting more officers into something that we all value. So, and one last point I want to make is, particularly in this area, people don't just walk and cycle; they also skate. And I've sort of brought this up before. I wonder if we could get a pilot scheme or something around skating, whether we could get some skate spots for people who skate as exercise and go to work, and that will be all for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Nigel. Before you come in, Lana, can I just remind you that there's opportunities for some of the points you raised at the different forum, at different committee meetings and through the council. So, Lana, I don't want to put you in a difficult situation, but by all means answer what you feel you're appropriately able to answer, and then just I'm sure Nigel can have his questions answered to anything else through the council system, and he can certainly raise all his concerns and his views in other particular platforms and parts of the authority. But over to you, Lana, on how you respond. I just don't want you in a difficult position that you feel necessarily. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hunt. So yeah, with regard to the funding, I'm sure that's a publicly available document with regard to how much Welsh Government funding goes to each authority. So I've got no problem looking that up for you and circulating that to members. I'll make a note of that now. Do that for you. And also with the commonplace, the link for you to see the maps. Yeah, I can circulate that. I think we did circulate it perhaps earlier on, back in beginning of the year. So I'll recirculate that for you to see. And the other thing, I think it was the mesh density, Councillor Hunt, you mentioned. So it's 250 metres in urban areas and it's 500 to 1,000 metres in outskirts of urban areas. And the guidance suggests by the third round of the map submission. So this is the second round. So then we'll have the third one. So the next iteration, then we should be aiming for that. And with the skates, people skating, yeah, I'll feed that back actually, because sometimes you do sort of think cycling and walking, but as you say, skateboarding, you know, people are on skates and the scooters, and you know, there's lots of different sort
Roller
of
skating.
roller skating, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, as long as you get them out and everybody's exercising, yes, it's great. Okay, yeah, I'll feed that back as well.
Thanks, Lana.
Thank you, Lana. Nigel, okay? Yeah.
Yeah, great, Steve. Great. I'll be
Thank
happy. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you very much. Councillor Jamie Evans, please.
Diolch, Chair. Just a quick one, going back to the consultation. I know it was mentioned that there wasn't a great engagement from young people. I think if anyone can get engagement from young people in consultation, then they need to, you know, be up for some sort of award, because young people are the hardest people to engage with. I know you mentioned you've done Facebook posts. As someone who's been social media officer for the last 2.5 years, Facebook is the least used platform by young people. So I'm just wondering if you've reached out on any other social media platforms. Twitter and Instagram are the ones that spring to mind. I know Twitter's a bit of an echo chamber, but you know, young people are more likely to be using Insta and Twitter. So maybe if we want to boost engagement, that could be something to look for in future. That's all I wanted to ask. Diolch, Chair. Diolch, Lana.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm not sure if there's a question in there, Lana, but if you want to respond briefly. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Evans. Yes, social media now is the platform that we're working on. We're also looking at TikTok as well, whether we can have the short sort of videos and any way that we can engage young people. As I say, because of lockdown, we would normally go into schools a lot more, but unfortunately we haven't been able to. Although in fairness, Joyce Smith's team, they've been looking at possibly going virtually into schools and on whiteboards. So we've been trying to, you know, try and engage, because I know there's Google Classroom as well. So and that's where the teachers are setting the work. So we were looking at trying to get in via that, because it could meet the criteria, the curriculum. So yeah, we've been looking with that, and also yes, Instagram Twitter. I know that Laura Pack's been working with our media team, and they've been fantastic actually, looking how we can get to younger people. I know there's the youth council as well, and the chair. We've been, because we were looking to see if there were influencers within the county borough, you know, appropriate influencers where, you know, when they got YouTube channels and everything. So I've got Laura looking at that, and we trying to, as I said, we did radio as well, broadcasting, but you know, with Evening Post, you know, people don't tend to read, you know, the sort of old-fashioned newspapers, I suppose, as much. But this is what we need. We're working with Anita James. We've been speaking to Sylvia as well, to Sylvia Griffiths, to discuss the best methods really of engaging. And I think, is it Yovo? I think, Councillor Evans, you might know is it Yovo, yeah. So we are looking at these, but obviously we've got to hit hard to reach groups. There's also the protected characteristics as well. So as I said, that the analytics coming back was the you know, the young people. So we have to target, but yeah, definitely with the social media platform. So yeah, I'll make a note of that. The Facebook is that's not as well used, but we have been looking at Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok as well. But if any of you have, also we did have a look at, we used the active travel money to buy Fitbits as well, and that was almost like a prize for you know, to encourage people to respond. So we'll probably be using, I think we got 10 Fitbits to use as prizes really, and we're also looking actually as well to get videos, so we film in a cross range of people and then put in these little clips online on our website of people's experience on different routes, and I know that we've also looking at is a Segway and also drones to look at the routes and video them, you know, when you go, I can't think what they called now, but when you put the cameras and you cycle down the routes and you take a video of it, so people can see before they go, oh right, okay, I can get through there, it's nice and flat, etc. So I think we're looking at, you know, different media then to have an understanding really of what everybody thinks of the routes, etc. So but yeah, if you've got any ideas, just let us know, and yeah, we can build on that.
Thank you, Lana. Yeah, you all right with that response? You want to come back?
Class, yeah. Looking forward to seeing the TikToks.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Look, the active travel plan is obviously a very important part of the authorities, and given the debate today, I concur with what Councillor Nigel Hunt said. It's been a real excellent exercise. It was important for Lana and her small team to understand where we are going. I don't see any further indications. I have just a couple myself, Lana, to raise with you. Obviously, consultation has been muted a lot this afternoon. This morning. I just wondered on one of the points. You mentioned Crynant. I know Crynant had the biggest response to the consultation. So what they are asking me in these communities are, what do you do with the consultation if they identify things? How do you report back or give them feedback so that they get a better understanding if you're not going to produce something, whether it be for financial reasons or for anything else, so they understand the complexities or where their consultation is worthwhile, as I said, meaningful in the first place. And I also have another two questions, information from officers to assist in the scrutiny today. Having read the report, I can see that various good schemes that the council have adopted, but there seems to be a little in the report as to the criteria that officers use to identify which schemes shall be supported and therefore allocated the funding. Given that given that there must be many competing projects within the county borough with limited sums of money and funds, what processes and procedures are used to determine how funds are allocated and which projects proceed? That would be one question. And the other one is, one of the concerns that have been raised previously is the inclusion of valley communities in the reports. Although I note that there are references to work undertaken in the Swansea Valley and some in Neath. Given the high deprivation and issues in our valleys, what more can be done to try and consider projects in these areas to help develop and promote suitable transport links? I know members touched on all of these during the conversation today, but if you can be more specific on the points I raised, I would appreciate it. Thank you, Lana.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Firstly then, with regard to Crynant, yeah, we had an overwhelming response actually. It was fantastic in Crynant. So as I say, we're looking at the responses that come through, and I've mentioned to Sustrans because they've basically pulled out all of the responses into a spreadsheet, and I said what I'd like to see is who, but because of GDPR, I don't think we can list specifically who, but I thought whether we can put like a reference number so that the person who submitted it, because you've got to sign in and register, that they can search and find their issue or representation. So I'd like to have columns who, what was said, our response, and how we're dealing with it. So say somebody in Crynant, they've said, right, I want a route linking from there to there. Well, in that last paragraph, I want to see, yes, we have included that route, so that you can see it's almost like a story and it flows through from the beginning. So I'm working with us. Obviously, again, it's it's the timeline. But I said, well, if we're asking the community what they think, we need to respond and say so. As I say, I'm working on that and I want that done so that, as you say, the people of Crynant will say it was worthwhile engaging. I can see what's happening to my comments. Yeah. So as I say, I'm going to make sure that we put that response in. So when we present then in June, those responses hopefully will be as an appendix to the report. That's what I want to have included. So that's the first question. Or the criteria used to identify. Yes. So part of with the active travel guidance, we have to then prioritise these routes. So it'll be short, medium and long term. And obviously some of them, they're quick wins. The issues could be that there are drop curbs needed. So we know that from a cost effective, we can put those in quite straightforward. So so we'll go through and work with the engineers, with senior officers, members. We look at these issues that have come through, and then we can identify then, as I say, if it's a short, medium, or a long-term project. And I think in the criteria there, you will be looking at what improvements would be needed. And I think that's how then you can sort of start seeing how they get prioritised, because then we got a bid then for them as part of the Welsh Government funding process. And as I say, that's Amanda Phillips's remit. She'd be looking at the responses from the consultation as well. I think that's why it's so important, going on to your next question, that we need to get more input from the valleys communities, get engage with them more to get their concerns onto this one map, so that we can see a fully comprehensive then view of, and as I say, these pins are really good because you can look back and see, oh, there's lots of red pins, so you can see there's a cluster there, because Newbridge Road Bridge, there were tons on there, and if you look on this map, which I will circulate again, the link, you can see, oh my gosh, there's an issue there. There's so many people have put forward issues, and then we can look through them one by one. So I think that's what we need to get out there, Chair. We need to get the consultation, awareness out there so that we can get them all in this one place, gather them all, and then we can see it then a fully comprehensive view then of our county borough and where the issues are.
Thank you, Lana. I got to pay tribute to you again, and not just for the work you do, but for how you responded today. I mean, you've been bombarded by an avalanche of questions, and you've responded very professionally and answered all the questions. So more power to you, and I'm sure from this committee, if we can support you in your work, as and when. I know Sean is very active, as you mentioned, but I'm sure every other member would as well in their own right or capacity. So thank you very much for this morning's responses to the questions. Right, I'm happy with that. Right, this report is only a progress report, so for noting and for information. I'll move on now to item 5, which is a pre-decision scrutiny. As I mentioned earlier, we have chosen to scrutinise item 7 on the Cabinet Board agenda, which is pages 25 to 58. So we would go over to the Cabinet now, and this is agenda item 7, examination by Audit Wales into the Council Regeneration Service as part of its well-being objectives. Obviously, the report is for information. The reporting officer is Simon Brennan. I asked Simon if he wants to raise anything that's not in the report prior to questions first. If not, I will go straight to questions. So over to you, Simon, please.
Happy to go straight to questions, Chair.
There we are. Excellent. Thought you might. Right, the first indication in scrutiny was Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Simon. You've caught me off guard now. Get my questions ready. Yeah, so my first question was obviously the date of the report's a little while ago. I'm not sure if this is a question for you, but I'm a bit curious as to why it's taken quite a while to sort of filter through to the committee, because the report's dated last year and quite a lot of time has passed since then. But I'll just go on to my next point first, and then perhaps you may be able to help. So yeah, in terms of the substance of the report, I think it is great that there's been sort of an external look in terms of the well-being objectives. I'm not sure perhaps how you felt about some of the feedback, but it looked quite useful feedback there. I think we talked a lot today about staff being very busy, and the report acknowledges that there's a very stretched team there, and I think we're all aware of that. And it's easy, I think, when the team is working very hard to sort of get the job done, for certain things to be prioritised and certain things to fall by the wayside. And I think they've perhaps picked up, engagement, consultation, comms as sort of things where we can perhaps do better. And perhaps I'm minded to agree with some of those points in there. I think one of the question I've got is with regards to the recommendations in Appendix 2 and this sort of target dates against our actions. Have they all been completed? They're all in the past, and obviously quite a bit of time has passed since the report was drawn up. So I'm just wondering first whether all those sort of recommendations in Appendix 2, have they all been covered off yet? There's things there about strategies to be created and that sort of thing. So that's the first part of my question, Simon.
Okay, do you want me to deal with that first, Chair? Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Carry on, Simon.
Okay. No particular reason. I mean, in terms of the report coming through, although they get dated, it takes a little while for them to get finalised, and there's usually a bit of toing and froing on bits and pieces of it. So that's why it's coming through now. The issue around sort of the feedback is generally what you would expect from these types of investigations. It's a bit of a snapshot in time, and inevitably some things you will tend to agree with. Other bits of it you might be thinking, okay, fine, but it's easier to accept them than to argue too much. Engagement and consultation is always a bit of an issue, really, with some of these programs. I mean, we're currently in the process of doing the applicants and submissions we'll be doing for the Levelling Up Fund and the Community Renewal Fund. Unfortunately, with the way things are going at the moment, the times that we're given between the information coming out and when the submissions have to go in are just incredibly short. And even if we had a lot of resources, which unfortunately we don't, I don't think you'd be able to do consultation. because it does not allow. I mean, even getting it through the process of going to CDG, then on to CMB, and then into cabinet is incredibly tight. And officers are working pretty hard to try and get that done at the moment. And, you know, we are concerned that we won't have all information by that point. So to go into a consultation program would be just impossible, unfortunately, because that's the way that the funding streams are generally set up. That said, in terms of engagement, you know, we have a sort of local strategy board for economic regeneration, and we have the PSB, obviously. So we are working through those groups to try and get as much consultation in as we possibly can. And I mean, the other sort of key point that we would say is that, you know, we have 60 or more very good conduits back to our communities. People who live within the communities and understand those communities and understand what they want. And I think that's as good a representation sometimes when times are cut short. That's a good representation for us to have those consultations with those local members to see whether what we're planning to do is what fits in with the needs of the community, and sometimes not just that particular community, but also the wider community, isn't it?
Sean, you want to come back?
Yeah, a couple of things now. I think, yeah, Simon, in terms of your point on some of those short timescales, I think the report is more of a sort of a damning on the Welsh Government and some of their approaches to their funding schemes than anything else on that regard. Because it does, aside from consultation, it acknowledges strategic planning is very difficult to do when we get dropped with some funding at very short notice. So I acknowledge that. But no, there's the specific question I was asking is in terms of the recommendations in the report. For example, on like recommendation 9 on communications, we'll develop a stakeholder engagement strategy, target date July 2020. Has that been done? That's what I'm trying to understand, whether these have all been completed or not. Because where I'm coming from is if they haven't been completed, I think it's something that should come back to the committee for us to have a look at in terms of the recommendations against the report. And certainly something like an external comms stakeholder engagement strategy would be a document that I'd like to see come through the committee. And if it has been completed, I'd like to see it in the committee and for us to have a look at it. So that's what I'm coming from on this, Simon. Thank you.
The recommendations are all at various stages, if I'm honest, Sean. We as ever with, unfortunately, with staff resources over the last year, they've been diverted onto some other things. So we haven't had opportunity sometimes to do some of the sort of day-to-day work, if you like, that is pretty necessary. And unfortunately, we've been running a little short in terms of staff numbers because we've had some staff leave and we haven't been able to recruit yet to replace those. But they will all get done, and they will all. I'm more than happy to bring them back through the board.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Chair, if I may really briefly, can I sort of request then perhaps if in the first instance, if the committee could get a document updating where you are with all of those recommendations at the first instance, as perhaps as soon as possible, really, for us to have a look at. And then for things like that engagement strategy, if we could get an early look at that, that would be really, I'd appreciate that. But obviously there's other recommendations there where perhaps we'd like to have a little nose at those as well. But, if that's okay with you, Simon.
That's absolutely fine. I think the idea of the report today was just to give you an overview of what the things that were said, and just to bring it out into the open and say, you know, they were comfortable with this, they felt that needed more work, etc. But more than happy to bring another report back that says where we are in terms of the specific process for each of the points.
Thank you, that's great. And I think that's just worth me acknowledging that, yeah, although the report's pointed out a few things that need improvement, there's actually a lot of really good comments in there about the great work the team's been doing. And I think, you know, I'm sure the team's really proud of some of that feedback. And I certainly am in terms of some of the comments that are really, really great. And I think it's worth me pointing that out. But thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Sean, and I'm sure we all concur with that, the excellent work and progress being made. Next indication was Councillor Hugh James, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. Hi, Simon. I got a couple of things to mention. I think it's a detailed report, as my predecessor speaker said, Sean. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Question that I've got for you really, Simon, is because there's no doubt that the cultural and environmental decline, not just in Neath Port Hall, but over the years, over the whole of Wales and everywhere, regeneration, that's why we're all here this morning as this committee and as you as the lead officer on your team. The question I've got, as far as stakeholders are concerned, you know, are you confident we're going to get work with them? Because stakeholders come and go, as you know, and it's a wide area, sometimes a bag of nails. And the second point, Simon, is you may not know this information, you might be able to help us. This is a report, obviously, auditing what we are doing in Neath Port Hall, but how do we compare to the other 22 authorities? Is there any data on this? Thanks, Simon.
Thanks, Councillor James. In terms of the stakeholder group, so we've got stakeholders that we bring in. We work with the Public Services Board, we work with stakeholders from the community and also from the commercial side. It's important that we have contact with both. Could we do more with stakeholders? You can always do more with stakeholders. Unfortunately, as I said earlier, sometimes the parameters of the timescales of the funding means that you can only do so much, and you've only got capacity to do so much. But you know, it's certainly something that is influential in the way that we look at the programs. And I mean, we also have sort of a lot of informal feedback. Think about the programs that we do in terms of regeneration, and where we, following feedback from the car commercial sector, is where we see there are gaps. You know, we've recently finished the refurbishment of the old metal box premises, for example, of the offices at the front there, and hopefully we're currently in discussion with 3 local companies who all need to expand and are interested in taking up effectively the whole of that building, of the offices at the front, which is, you know, it's about not only jobs safeguarded for us, but obviously allowing them to expand as well, with well-paid jobs. So it's a big part of what we do, is identifying gaps where we see them, following our consultations, sometimes informal, sometimes formal, and coming up with the policies that we have. In terms of the comparison with our authorities across Wales, that's always quite difficult, I guess, because there isn't an easy way of doing that. I suppose the audit report will tell us that we're on the right path and that we're doing a lot of things well. They'll point out things that they think we can do better as well, and you know, we'll strive to do that. But I think, as I understand it from our discussions with Welsh Government colleagues, we're pretty well regarded, and we have a number of schemes that they see as being quite innovative and have, you know, significant impact within the community. The Neath redevelopment, for example, with the leisure anchor, is something that they're very keen on, and I think that's one of the first they're aware of across Wales, really, where we're bringing facilities like that into the heart of the town centre to try and increase footfall, increase vibrancy within the town centre. So we get a lot of good positive feedback, but there isn't there's not a sort of league table, if you like, of where people sit in these things across Wales.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Simon.
You all right?
Yes, fine. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Chair.
No worries. Any other member? I see no hands. Anybody want to ask a question? No. Just from me, Simon, I also concur with Councillor Percy's. He covered a lot of what I would like to see brought back to this committee as and when. We do know the difficulties and the within the workforce and the excellent work that your officers are probably doing as other officers in all our departments. So that's acknowledged. One quick question on the audit Wales. So again, Sean sort of covered it, but when they give recommendations, are there any penalties? Is there time scales? Is there something that we have to comply as to get to a certain level of standard, especially with the well-being objectives? That's what I'm more concerned about, because it's a very important piece of legislation, and it covers us in every sort of scrutiny committee anyway. It's just I wondered if there is any recommendations that fall short of the high standards that they set, is there any comebacks to the authority, or is there sort of ongoing work to keep going or trying to get to the end result then? That's all I'd like to ask. Thank you.
No sort of penalties as such. I mean, if they felt that we weren't performing well enough, they may be perhaps less keen to give us some of the grant funding that we've been very successful in getting. So that's probably a reasonable barometer of how comfortable Welsh Government are with us. It's as ever with these sorts of reports, you know, they can only do so much when they come in, and some bits of it you would agree with and some of it you wouldn't. We're certainly happy to address the points that are raised in there. And some of it is valid, and if we could do things, if we had more resource, you would do a lot more, if you like. But sometimes you have to do what you can with the resources you've got.
Yeah, thank you for that. Fully understand. Thank you. So no other members indicate. This report is on the recommendation, sorry, is on page 27, and again, it's only for noting. So we'll move on the agenda. Item 6 is the Scrutiny Forward Work Programme. Obviously, the Forward Work Programme is attached for information only, and for members to note. You all know the processes that you have at hand. You can add anything to the Forward Work Programme at any time. That's in your own gifts as members of the committee. Nadine, is there anything you would like to mention on the Forward Work Programme?
No, just as you were going to say, really, it's just for information, and like always, if anybody wants to add anything at any time, but it's just for members to note.
Thank you. Sean, Councillor Purdy.
Yeah, just to confirm, obviously I've made a few comments earlier with Simon and some items perhaps to come back to the committee. So I suppose they'll be added on in due course.
Yeah, Nadine, if you note those, yeah. Okay, that's lovely. Right, item 7 is any urgent items. There are no urgent items this morning, and that will only remain for me to close the meeting. Can I wish you all a wonderful weekend with whatever you choose to do, with the restrictions sort of being lifted even more so. Enjoy your weekend, as I said, with whatever. And thank you very much for your attendance this afternoon. Thank officers, cabinet members, and all scrutiny committee members for your input today. Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend.
Yeah.
Talbot.